welcome to the forum on Monday, May 18th. We have a really exciting program today. If it has any content that I suspect it does, I'm just in the process of retiring from a 240-year career as a mental health counselor, and I suspect that this presentation is going to break at least some denial in this room. We're looking at Catherine Crooker, thank you very much, from the Community Action, Washington County Community Action, and I will actually not take any more of our time. I'd like to introduce Catherine, and remember, questions will follow after her presentation, and only forum members can ask questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine Crooker from the Washington County Community Action.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I hope we'll have a chance to have more of a conversation and hear more of your thoughts and questions. I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of a presentation and background about Community Action. But let me first start by telling you a little bit about my background. I've been a long-time resident in the area. I am the Director of Advancement at Community Action, which means I do fundraising and communications and marketing. I have worked in Washington County for a long time. I used to direct the foundation at Tuality Healthcare. So I'm very familiar with this area. I used to work at Pacific University, so deep roots out here. And it was a thrill for me to be able to come and join Community Action about 2.5 years ago. I've known Geraldine Ness, our executive director, for a long time, and others. I have to thank Emily, who, come to find out, was chair of our board back when Geraldine was hired. So thank you. Geraldine's been with us for 42 years and executive director for about 30. So we're very grateful for you bringing her to us. So let me see if I can remove this and move around the room a little bit more. Get my PowerPoint set up. Here we go. Okay. All right. So Community Action, but before I get started, I invite you to take a moment and think back with me to a time in your life when you faced a particularly difficult challenge. It may have been a health issue, it may have been the loss of a job, but some time in your life that was particularly difficult for you to get through. And think for a moment about what surrounded you at that time to help you get through. What were the helping hands that were there to help you transition out of that challenge? What we see at Community Action every day is clients who come to us who many times are facing the most difficult challenge of their life. And we are that helping hand to help them transition out of that situation. And so I think we can all agree that we have all faced challenging times in spite of doing what we believe to be the best thing at the moment and need that helping hand on occasion. And so that's what we are there to do for our community. So I want to share with you a moment a little bit about what we believe for our community.
We believe in the power of hope.
We believe in the potential of each person.
The potential to grow.
The potential to create change.
We create vision.
A vision of what's possible.
A vision
Where we all have a home.
A vision where we all have enough to eat.
A vision where we all have
healthcare.
A vision where all our children are ready to succeed in school.
A vision where children and families can focus on growth and change.
We believe that everyone deserves to live with dignity.
Everyone deserves to live with hope.
We believe
that every child deserves a safe environment to learn, grow, and dream.
We believe in the power of education.
We believe in the potential of
all parents.
We believe in healthy parenting.
We believe in the power of positive parent and child relationships. We believe that healthy moms equal healthy babies.
We believe in access to quality
and affordable childcare.
We believe in preventing homelessness.
We believe that hunger and homelessness can be eliminated.
We know that a little support can get you to the other side.
We know that families are stronger when their basic needs are met.
We know that poverty can be prevented.
We believe in the power of well-being.
We believe in the resiliency of our neighbors.
We believe in the power of community, and together we are striving.
We believe in the power of spirit.
The spirit of families to overcome.
The spirit of the community to help.
The spirit of all of us coming together.
Creating the change
Being the change.
When each of us,
all of us
Work together.
when we work as a community,
When we pull our collective spirit.
When we have the will,
We have the
power, we have the strength
we have the ability.
To create the lasting change.
That makes our community stronger. We are Community Action.
We are Community Action, and that is many of our staff, board members, clients, and there are a lot of things that we believe and have seen to be true for our community. That when the right services are there at the right time, families do transition out of poverty. So what do you think are some of the reasons people fall into poverty?
Healthcare expenses.
Healthcare expenses, jobs, or lack of jobs, yes.
Low wages.
Low wages,
Transportation.
transportation. High rent, yes, that's a particularly challenging factor in our community right now.
Divorce or death of a spouse.
Divorce or death. So the answer is yes. All of those things are true. And for each family, there can be a different combination of factors that create this challenging situation that put them in a place where they need to come and ask for that helping hand to move on. So, what do you think it takes in Washington County for a family of 4, so say a young couple, 2 kids, what do you think it takes for a family of 4 to get by in our county right now?
30,000 a year.
So, say that again?
30,000.
30,000?
Annual.
Annual, yes. Any other guesses?
55.
55? 55 is a lot closer. Yes. So we talk about the sustainability or the self-sufficiency index versus the federal poverty level. And in Washington County right now, it takes about $60,000 a year to get by with the cost of childcare, housing. And so what we see more and more, especially after our recent, we're all grateful that the great economic recession is behind us, but we're seeing is a lot of families are being left behind. And a lot of working families are being left behind and are still facing challenges. So if the breadwinner in the family earns $10 an hour, that's $20,000, a little over $20,000. Now take a look at their expenses. And that's not everything that they need yet. They are already over budget, and a lot of things have been left out. Paying taxes, all of these other things that we all take for granted every day. And families in Washington County are making tough choices every single day about which of these things to pay for and where they're going to cut back to be able to try to get by. And so, what is poverty? Well, as I mentioned, we have this number that's the federal poverty level, and that number was set way back in about 1963 And it's a formula that's based on what the cost of food was for a family at that time as a percentage of their budget. And we know that especially here, now where housing is so much more expensive, childcare is a huge factor, that is not enough to sustain a family anymore. The federal poverty level is about $21,000 a year for a family of 4. I'm not going to read you all these numbers, but I'll point out a few key things. So in Washington County, to be self-sufficient, a family of 4 with 1 adult, 1 infant, a preschooler, this is what it takes, which is up about $60,000 a year. And this purple bar right here is the cost of child care for that family, for private child care. Private quality child care in Washington County can cost more for a family than college tuition at a state institution. So this is a huge barrier for a lot of people who need to be working, but to find safe, quality, affordable child care can be a real challenge. So this is $9.95 an hour, the minimum wage. So you can see if the person's working full time, they're nowhere near the self-sufficiency index. And so as a colleague of mine says, an awful lot of the time, sadly, this just turns out to be a math problem, where even though they're working, it takes more than that to get by here. So who do we see experiencing poverty in Washington County? We were talking about this a little bit earlier. It is different here in Washington County than what you see in Portland. In Portland, urban areas, it tends to be more visible somehow. And out here, our poverty tends to be more invisible, tucked away in pockets where it's not so obvious, here in the economic engine of the state of Oregon. And so 7% of seniors are experiencing poverty, children. The number one group that we see experiencing poverty at disproportionate numbers is single women with children. And that's been true and a growing trend since about the 1980s, sadly. And any kind of single parent household would be experience poverty at a higher rate. Yes?
Is this based on the federal poverty level, or are you?
The federal poverty level, yes. So this is not self-sufficiency, this is poverty.
Do you have information on self-sufficiency, those who are not self-sufficient?
Yes, I don't have those numbers with me today, but we do have that information, yeah. So 47% of the poverty population in Washington County are minorities. So they are disproportionately impacted by poverty. 18% of our population in Washington County living in poverty are disabled. And high school graduates, I'm sorry that number's not got cut off up there, but one of the things that we've seen over the years is that a high school diploma used to be enough to be someone's ticket to a path out of poverty. And now we know that that's no longer true. If you only have a high school diploma, you are much more likely to end up struggling with and not being able to transition out of poverty. And sadly, now we're seeing that it's becoming even true with an undergraduate degree. And more we're seeing that some kind of graduate degree is really what's required for people to move on in our county. So it's a county-wide issue and requires county-wide solutions, public, private, nonprofit, government solutions to address all these complex issues. What do you think are some of the barriers to keeping people from moving out of poverty?
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. That can be a barrier. If you don't have hope, how do you believe that you can make a change?
Unemployment.
Unemployment. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we're seeing is that if you've been unemployed for a year or more, the likelihood of you getting another job absolutely plummets. So the long-term unemployed in our community, it's a huge barrier for them. Yes?
Lack of affordable housing.
Lack of affordable housing. This is a big factor in Washington County now. Again, you know, we've got this great economic boom going on, which is good. We want that. But we're also seeing this squeeze in the cost of housing. The county issues housing vouchers from the federal government to help low-income families be able to afford housing. And so you can take that voucher and go out and find a rental unit, and the voucher helps pay part of that rent. What's happening in Washington County is that people with the vouchers can't find housing that they can afford or that's available. And so we are turning back in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of vouchers to the federal government, because there's a deadline. You only have, I believe it's 90 days to you get your voucher, and you got 90 days to find a place to live that you can afford. And people aren't finding a place to live, and they're losing the vouchers, and they're going back. Yes?
Your graph showed that there's no access or limited access to affordable childcare.
So that's another barrier. So the comment was the lack of affordable childcare. That can be a huge barrier for a lot of low-income families to be able to find a place to have their kids safe while they're in working. So a lot of barriers to moving out of poverty seem so simple to many of us. And I want to introduce you now to Robert. And as you listen to Robert's story, listen to some of the barriers that Robert identifies in what got in his way. And then I'm going to share some really good news about Robert after you meet him.
Homelessness is real tough. I mean, you just think of your basic necessities: showers, using the restroom, somewhere to eat, somewhere to stay dry and clean. You don't have any of that, and it's real hard, especially if you have medical or mental health issues, which I have both, and it makes it real hard to just basic survival. I went through a bad divorce. I was really in love with my kids, still love them to death, and they were my life. So after that divorce, the mental health issues kicked in, and I started having problems there. And then I sold cars. That's what I did in my career all my life. And then in 2008, when the economy crashed, naturally it hit the auto industry, and just through circumstances, I became homeless. I made the wrong choices financially, and ended up to where I had nothing. As far as you lose a lot of people in your family and your friends because of the bipolar disorder, it's tough for people to deal with this, because we're not easy people to deal with. And then once you add the stress of being homeless, things get worse. So it was about 2.5 years that I lived on the streets, in people's garages or on their porches or in barns or just wherever I could get shelter. I stayed away from asking for help, because you feel like, well, each day will change and it'll get better, and it doesn't. I just reached the point that I had enough, where I was at the end of my rope, and the VA has a crisis number, and I called that number on a Friday, and Monday afternoon I was assigned here to the Salvation Army Vet and Family Center. I'd been here maybe 2 months, and one of the guys said he was meeting with a community action caseworker, and naturally my ears perked up. I'm like, okay, what's this about? What other program is available? First thing she did was have me sign up for the Rent Well class, which helps you, since you were homeless and you don't have the recent housing. It's real hard in Washington County and Oregon itself to get housing without a good background. So what the Rent Well class helped us do was overcome the barriers that we were facing. Whether it's getting your credit report and finding out what's on there and writing to try to straighten out your credit, or remembering previous landlords, and if you owe for an eviction or past rents, they'll show you how you can budget yourself and send what you can to at least attempt to start paying back your debts and overcome those barriers. And the other part that really help is like our bus passes. I have no income because I'm waiting for my Social Security disability, and they paid, and they're still paying to this day, my bus passes, so that helps me immensely. When it came time that I did find an apartment complex that I got approved at, they went in for my safety, and as well as the landlords, is to inspect the apartment, make sure everything was adequate, and it was sufficient for a veteran or anybody basically to live there. They paid the deposits that were required, which again, with no income and having been homeless and unemployed for 2.5 years, I had no chance at all to do it without that program. I wanted to transfer my driver's license to Oregon, but again, it's $65. Well, as soon as I mentioned it to my caseworker, within a week they had cut the checks, and I finally just passed the test and got my driver's license for Oregon, so I have that state ID. Having somebody that you can talk to that's not going to look down on you, that's the biggest, that helps a lot. I mean, you feel comfortable. Oh, I love helping everybody. I love people. Basically, I like helping people, and in giving help, it helps me. And I come back here all the time. I was here last week 5 days, even with my bad legs. I was cutting the grass because it needed it. And I know if I can give back a little bit, and everybody else is giving back, it helps another vet, and that's what I like to do.
So that's Robert. One of the honors that I have in this work is to get to meet people like Robert. He is an amazing, amazing man, and did experience homelessness for about 2.5 years. And we just found out last week that his Social Security disability was approved, which is a huge, huge step. It takes a long time. And now he is stable. He has income that will support him. And boy, does he give back. Last winter, he spoke at one of our events, and we give a small stipend to clients who are willing and brave enough to come and tell their story publicly. And we gave Robert a small thank you token. It was like a $50 Fred Meyer gift card. And as you heard, Robert had no income at all. Robert took that $50 gift card, and he went and he bought supplies for the other veterans at the Salvation Army Center and went and donated them. And he did not use that money on himself. And he continues to volunteer and give back. But some things like $65 for his driver's license was a huge barrier for Robert, not being able to afford a bus pass to be able to get around. So these are the things that can really cause ongoing challenges and keep people from being able to successfully make that transition. And the hope. She heard Robert say, having somebody who really believed in him and didn't look down on him. We hear that all the time from our clients, that the help that you were able to give me was really, really important, but it was the hope that you gave me and the belief that I could make a change. So we know that there are a lot of different strategies that work to help people transition out of poverty. And we are involved in all these areas: preventing homelessness, keeping people safe and warm through emergency rent assistance and energy assistance, housing the homeless. We have a shelter for homeless families in Hillsborough, and we house up to 5 families at a time, and then we work with the Homeless Network for the whole county to coordinate support for families who have fallen into homelessness. And helping teach people about budgeting, the rent well classes that you heard about, teaching them how to be better renters and overcome errors from their past that are that barrier to them moving on to a better future. And the best possible start in life. We run Head Start for most of Washington County, and want to assure that these kids are really ready to learn successfully when they get to school. And so in this area, 1,000 families, this is not countywide, this is just locally, 1,000 families received emergency rent and energy assistance, and we know that without the emergency rent payment to help them stay in their home when they were about to be evicted, we know some of those families would have ended up homeless. And so that $500 rent payment is a huge investment, because when a family does become homeless, it ends up costing all of us about $5,000 to $10,000 in social services to help them through that incredibly traumatic transition. So we know that that's $500 very well spent. 115 families served by Head Start. We serve about 900 families countywide in our Head Start program, and families at our shelter. So why should we all care about these issues? Yes?
You just said it. It saves us all a lot of money.
It saves us all a lot of money when we can intervene early and help people get on the right path as early as possible. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Because they're not helping people. We're helping people get
better. We're helping people get better, yeah. Yeah, because they are people. They are our neighbors. Sometimes they're our family. We saw a lot of that in the economic downturn. People that never imagined they would need these services face that. And because we're all better off when we live in a community where everybody has enough to eat. And we're all better off when we live in a community where everybody has a safe place to live. Our kids, all the kids in school are better off when everybody else in the classroom is engaged and ready to learn. So these issues really do impact all of us. So there are lots of different ways that you can help with educating people about these issues, advocating for things like affordable housing, participate, donate to causes that you care about that address issues like this. Many of the other organizations in our community are partners with us, and we partner a lot with our faith communities. A lot of the churches and others support us. So in whatever way speaks to you, there are ways that you can get involved and help to improve and create a Washington County where families are strong, resilient, involved in the community, and everyone lives with dignity and security. So thank you very much. And as you can see, this is our new logo. You saw a mixture in our video. We just unveiled our new logo at our 50th anniversary gala a couple of weeks ago. And so this year marks the 50th anniversary of Community Action serving this community. And so we have a lot of great activities going on, including a very exciting project with the Washington County Museum, and Karen is here. She's helping us with this. We'll be launching on September 10th an exhibit, and it's not about community action. It is about 50 years of the changing face of poverty in our community, because it has changed a lot. It was very rural years ago, and as we know, it's a very diverse county, both rural and really high tech now. So obviously the challenges that low income families face have changed. So we're very excited to be working on that.
Catherine, thank you very much. And before we invite folks to come, yes, by all means, let's applaud. Thank you. Great presentation. I believe everybody in this room has a better understanding of some of the issues that they maybe don't want to understand. Folks, I'd have to remind you, only forum members can ask questions, and I believe we have one coming up to the mic right now. Catherine, please.
Yes.
My name is Bill Kroger. I'm a forum member, and thank you for coming in today. And
Hi, Bill.
I compliment you for your efforts and what you're doing.
Thank you.
I was just curious as to what role alcohol and drugs have in homelessness and poverty, and whether the legalization of marijuana was going to have any kind of an impact on all this.
Alcohol addiction, what we see both with any kind of physical health problem, mental health problem, addiction problem, is that sometimes those issues can cause people to fall into poverty, and sometimes poverty can cause people to fall into those issues. And so we do often see that those things go hand in hand. And so we partner with a lot of other organizations. For example, LifeWorks Northwest, they're one of the local mental health providers, and do everything that we can to help our clients access the services that are going to help them get stable and healthy and whole, both financially and physically. But yeah, you do often see the two go together. In terms of the legalization of marijuana, that for us just kind of falls into that whole realm of anything that is potentially an unhealthy behavior is something that we want to support people to move beyond.
Chris Leslie, board member, glad you're here. I have a question about released prisoners from prisons and jails. How do they fit into your program? Do you have steps to help them?
We don't have, let's see, I'll answer that in two ways. When people are released from the Washington County Jail here in Hillsborough, oftentimes they are then kind of rootless and challenged to find a place to go. And so some of them do end up becoming clients of ours. If you go to our website, you can see a video of a young woman. Her name is Dixie. And Dixie was released from prison 3 days before she was due to give birth to her child. With no resources, nowhere to go, and no family. And so Dixie ended up coming to our Hillsborough Family Shelter, and we supported her and got her connected to Tuolity Healthcare, and she gave birth to a beautiful daughter, Indira, and Dixie had addiction problems. And through our help, she was connected with a long-term support program called Hope Springs. And now I just saw Dixie, she and her daughter came to our gala a couple of weeks ago, and Dixie is absolutely thriving. She is now working as a drug and alcohol rehab counselor full-time, going on, getting her college degree, and her daughter, now the cycle has been broken, and Indira, who's now 5 years old, is going to have a thriving future. So they do end up coming to us, although we don't have a specific program. The other program that we do run, however, is very unique in the country. We have a Head Start program at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. And so women who have very young children, if they meet certain criteria, they can have Head Start classes with their kids and stay connected. And what we see is that this parenting education for these women makes a huge difference when they then are released and finish serving their time. They have better parenting skills and they're much more bonded with their children than if they hadn't seen them at all for all those years. So those are the two ways that we connect with that population.
No men?
No, we do end up sometimes with men who have had need our services in various ways. We primarily serve families through our shelter, so we wouldn't
That's what
have.
It sounded like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John Bell, forum member.
Yes.
I'm concerned about affordable housing for all levels. We don't have any anymore in Washington County. You're talking about anywhere from 40% to 50% of their income is going for housing. And we don't even need as much housing space in Europe and some other places in Asia. They have down to 400 square feet or less per person. Maybe we've got that's one way to help the cost factor. And the next weekend we're going to have a small house forum in Portland where you can look at small house. But how are you really doing some about affordable housing, and how are you going to get a men's shelter in Washington County? We don't have any other than the Salvation Army for veterans, and that's only 43 places, or 44, 45 in the neighborhood. Then we got a little bit over at Good Neighbors, and they're another 40. And we've got a brand new one. The Union Gospel Mission has got their women's family, but we still don't have anything for, quote, men. Mm-hmm. Or, and we lost our one overnight campus at the First Baptist Church in Bay Beaverton. That used to be overnight when it got too cold outside.
Right,
We haven't
yeah.
had anything there yet.
Yeah, that emergency shelter did close last year. Thank you. That's, again, about 5 questions all in one, so I'll do my...
Well, they seem to
You're very well
in the
educated on these
mushroom.
issues. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, once you get homeless, you don't have that little thing called address.
Right.
Next thing you got, you may or may not have enough money to buy a cell phone.
Right.
You don't have connection that way.
Yeah.
So without an address, without a cell phone, you can't get a job.
The barriers become almost insurmountable, yeah. So on the affordable housing question, we as Community Action don't run affordable housing programs, but we spawned many of the affordable housing organizations that are here in our community. And so we partner very, very, very closely. And so again, as I mentioned in my talk, these are complex issues that require county-wide solutions, and we need partnerships with government agencies, nonprofits, and the private sector in order to address these questions. And so there are a lot of conversations going on right now at all of those levels about what are we going to do in this community? How do we want housing to look? Even the West Side Economic Alliance is involved in having conversations about housing for our county. So I don't have a specific answer for you yet, but I can tell you that the conversations are ongoing, and if you ever want to participate in any of that, do give me your card and we can get you connected. Then the other question you'd asked about was shelter. So one of the principles that we believe now about shelter, and we hear this a lot, shouldn't we just build more shelters? Shouldn't we build more shelters? We are approaching this from a model of what's called housing first. And so our goal is, instead of building more shelters, to intervene further upstream before it gets to that point, so that we don't need the shelters. Now, we're not there yet. We're in this kind of transition time, but we are doing a much better job of reaching and working with families before they actually end up in our shelter to try to help them find solutions earlier on in the process. And so rather than just having their name on a waiting list and then we call them and say, okay, we have a room for you, when they call and say, I have a need, we start working with them then, even though we may have a 60 family waiting list for the shelter. And so we're finding that with more and more of those people, we can find them a different solution before they actually end up in the shelter. Yes.
Thank you for being here. John McWilliams, board member. I'm thinking that this time of year we start having a lot of crops are coming along in the farms, a big farming community, and we're having an influx of migrant workers. Do you have any position that these people who need help as they're progressing through the cycle, that they need some assistance from outside? Do you have anybody that works with the migrant workers?
We help in a couple of different ways. There is a Head Start program for children of migrant workers, and that's run not by us anymore, it's run by Oregon Child Development Coalition, but it's a really great program to help the children of migrant workers get that grounding and start being ready for school themselves, even though they're migrant and they're transitory. The other thing that we do is very specific outreach to try to help pregnant women who fall into that category access a medical home. Because we know that when women don't get proper prenatal care, they end up showing up in the emergency room to give birth and often don't have very good outcomes. And again, when they show up in the emergency room uninsured and haven't had any prenatal care and there's an expensive outcome, it costs all of us. So it's another one of those early interventions. It's better to have them get connected so that they can get that prenatal care.
Yeah, do you have any information on how long your clients have been living in Washington County?
We don't track that specifically. A lot of low-income families are very transitory, as we know. And so we don't know how long they've been living here specifically. But we know that people who are struggling to stay stable move around a lot more than most of us would want to.
Harry Bodine, board member, and thanks for coming. Catherine, a two-part question. I'll back off here a little bit. How is community action financed, number one? And I understand that we have a justice service levy coming in November, and part of that money goes to support some of your programs, I believe.
Yes. So the vast majority of our funding does come from various government sources. And so a lot of it is federal money that comes through the state of Oregon and then is directed to us. And these kind of money, for example, for energy assistance, this is funding, and Head Start, this is funding that goes to counties all across America. But that money is handled in different ways in different communities. And in this community made a decision back in 1964 on October 13th that rather than having it all come through the county government, they created this private 501c3 nonprofit organization called Community Action. And we have a board of directors, and our board is made up of a number of local people, including Mayor Willie, Mayor Doyle, Dick Scout, and a number of others are involved with our board. And so most of our funding is government funding. We also raise private money, which is a lot of my role, to enhance and make those government dollars go further for our community. There's more we can do for our local families when we bring some private money to bear to kind of leverage that federal money and do some things the federal money may not allow us to do. And then the public safety levy, yes. So a lot of our housing and homeless services and our shelter funding is a piece of this public safety levy, because years ago the county government and the sheriff's office and a number of others recognized that, again, these are complex interlinked issues, but when you have increased homelessness, it can really cause safety issues for the community. And so we want to do all we can to have our community housed safely.
Chris Leslie, once again, thank you. I'm thinking about veterans and their families. Do you work with the DVA, the American Legion, and USO? Do they help you in any way?
We have a special program. You saw Robert's story, and Robert came to us as a veteran through a special program called SV, I'm not going to get the name right, but anyway, it's a federally funded program specifically targeted at veterans to try to address this issue of veteran homelessness. And so we work with it in that way. And then we partner with places like the Salvation Army and other organizations that also serve veterans. So we are a piece of that very, very important network for our county in serving veterans. And we're starting to see some real progress and some real positive, happy stories like Robert's.
Well, I know the DVA is a big help.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you.
Bill Kroger again.
Yeah.
What role does the legislature play in the poverty and homelessness in Washington County? And why don't you talk a minute about what kind of lobbying do you do here or down in Salem?
Mm-hmm. So our lobbying efforts, we have a statewide association that all community action agencies belong to and have a lobbyist who does work with the legislators in Salem. But we, on a local level, stay very, very connected to our elected officials. As I mentioned, many of them are on our board. We're a very unique board structure, and Emily can speak to this probably better than I can. We have what's called a tripartite board, so 1/3 of our board must be made up of elected officials. And so that helps us stay very, very connected into those worlds and helps those elected officials see the problems firsthand. And 1/3 of our board is made up of low-income people, clients, people who have received our services, so that their voice is right there at the table. And then 1/3 is other community leaders and community members. And so we meet often locally with our legislators and other electeds here. And then we do have a lobbyist who works statewide on statewide issues down in Salem.
John Hutzler, foreign member. I was wondering if there are any qualifications that people need to meet in order to access your services. I assume from what you described about sources of funding that there are probably qualifications for different funding streams, but
yes,
are there any,
absolutely.
Are there any requirements in general to?
The vast majority of our programs, a family has to qualify as low income. And oftentimes that means at or below the federal poverty level. And so you're correct. There are some programs where their income can be a little bit higher than that, and others where it has to be at that federal poverty level or below. And those requirements, for the most part, are set by the federal or the state funders who say, you know, these are the qualifications to get into that particular program. We do have a program that anybody can access. It's called Child Care Resource and Referral, and it's a program where we help educate child care providers. Many of them are home businesses, and so we help them learn business skills, learn how to run a more quality program so that the kids get educated, and then absolutely anybody who has a child in Washington County can call and get a referral to, you know, a home-based child care provider in your area. And we actually have two of the largest employers in the county who are so impressed with this program that on a private basis they contract with us to provide that service to their employees.
I have a question.
Run. Go ahead, line up. Go ahead.
Oh.
Go.
Generational poverty is a huge issue, and you had one small example of someone who broke away from that in the young woman who was released from jail and gave birth immediately and is now on track and has broken that cycle if indeed she was part of that to begin with. To what extent does community action acknowledge the sources of generational poverty and work to break those cycles and change people's lives from that area?
The good news is, if Geraldine Ness, our executive director, were here speaking with you, she's been doing this work for 42 years, and she's been executive director for 30, and she would say that in her career she has seen a major positive trend in Washington County in less and less of seeing people caught in generational poverty. The programs that were put in place in the 1960s to fund things like Medicaid, food stamps, a lot of those programs really have done a lot to break that cycle here in our community. And so what we tend to see more often is people who fall into poverty for some reason, and we know if we can get the right support there, they will transition back out. There is a way out now. They don't have to be stuck in that place.
In regard to funding again, I'm wondering whether the governmental funding that you receive can be used to support your private fundraising efforts, or whether the private fundraising supports the private fundraising efforts.
The government support cannot be used to fund the private fundraising efforts, and so we have very generous local donors who help us do that, and including the Meyer Memorial Trust and others who really believe in our work and believe in what we're doing on the private fundraising side.
And can you give us a sense of what proportion of the private funding that you receive goes to direct service?
It's about, I'm doing some math in my head, we're at about 78% right now.
Thank you.
Harry Bodine again. A survey out about a year ago talking about the number of homeless children in the school system, and Beaverton had some staggering number of 3,500, something like that. Mainly people, I think, crashing on their friends' couches. What relationship do you folks have with the school districts, high schools especially, I guess, and with dealing with this part of the population?
We do a lot of work around homeless children, both families that come to our shelter who all have children, but we have somebody working at Community Action who is the homeless liaison to the Hillsborough School District, and so she specifically works with any child in the Hillsborough School District identified as homeless to try to maintain their stability and help them be successful. And then Beaverton has a similar person within the Beaverton School District, but we partner with that person a lot and coordinate often to try to help those kids move on to be successful. And it's a challenge. I mean, I can't imagine. How do you do your homework when you don't know where you're going to sleep that night? You know, the pressures that these kids are going through. The other thing that we know is that with brain studies now, we understand more and more about the long-term mental trauma, physical trauma of the stress of being homeless on children, especially young children. And so we know if we intervene early, we can reverse those effects. But there's new brain research that really supports this idea of intervening as early as possible.
A real quick one. Similar arrangements with Tiger Tualatin and Forest Grove, Gaston. The other school districts.
Yeah, well, we don't work that closely with the other school districts. They have liaisons within the school districts themselves. When we do have a homeless family from one of those communities, yes, then we work with them.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the close of our program. Please, let's give a moment of thanks for a wonderful presentation. Not only thanks to Catherine, but for a moment, thanks to Community Action. Cool, thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're coming to a close. Let me just remind folks that next Monday, we will not have a program. It's Memorial Day, and if you want to come here for lunch, please do. I think they're open, but we're not. And on the 8th, June 8th, we have, June 1st. June 1st is our next program. I'm so excited about June 8th, but I don't mean to diss June 1st. June 1st, the program is called Political Analysis, where we have Dr. Moore and Len Bergstein sharing insights about the recent election. Well, it will be recent, it's about to happen tomorrow. And then on the 8th, we have our county chair, Andy Dyke, with the state of the county, which I know lots of people are excited about. Folks, check our website, and thank you again for being here. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot.